Thanks to MPB for sponsoring this video. Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs and this is my review of the Fujifilm X-E5, a mid-range mirrorless camera with a 40 megapixel APS-C sensor, viewfinder and built-in stabilization. It's available in silver or black, and if you're thinking it looks a lot like an X100 VI, you're not going mad. The X-E5 is essentially an interchangeable lens version of that camera, and Fujifilm's even launched a new 23mm f2.8 pancake lens to complete the look, albeit with an aperture that's one stop dimmer. Announced in June 2025, the X-E5 body costs around $1,700 or £1,300, or around $1,900 or £1,550 in a kit with the new 23mm f2.8 lens. Meanwhile, the lens by itself will be available later in the year for around £400, so that's a pretty decent saving to get it in the X-E5 bundle. Now, I'm sure the camera is going to be very popular, so if you are interested in buying it, I'd place an order sooner rather than later, and I've got links to the latest pricing below. Now, at the time I made this video, the US pricing was all over the place thanks to tariffs and stock that preceded them at the old prices. So looking at the UK instead, the X-E5 body is similarly priced to the X-T50, while the bundle comes in about £50 less than an X100 VI. Now, as you'll discover, they all share a number of features in common, so for many of us, it'll be about choosing the style that suits you best. I spent a few days with the X-E5 and I'm going to help you make that choice, but first a quick word from MPB who've sponsored this video. Buying new cameras and lenses can get pretty expensive, so whenever I'm looking at new gear, I often sell an older model to help fund the purchase. Now, I've bought and sold cameras in many different ways over the years, but I keep returning to MPB as it's way easier than dealing with marketplaces. Unlike most services, I don't need to spend any time creating a listing and taking photos of the gear, not to mention haggling with potential buyers or even having to post it myself afterwards. MPB simply gives you an instant quote and can arrange a collection from your doorstep. The money is then paid into your account within a few days, and if the condition of the gear is better than you described it, they'll even increase your fee. I also like buying used gear from MPB as they're very clear about the condition with decent photos taken from all sides, a comprehensive list of exactly what's included, and even an extended free warranty. So when you're selling something that you don't need anymore, or if you're shopping for used gear that you can absolutely trust, check out MPB using the links in the description. Right, back to the review. In terms of general specifications, the X-E5 is essentially an X-T50 in a different body shape, and both share a similar price too, at least in the UK and Europe. In its favour, the X-T50, seen here, has a pop-up flash, a more detailed screen, and a fully automatic mode with auto subject detection that is sadly missing on the X-E5. Meanwhile, the X-E5 counters with a shorter height and a screen which angles all the way up and down further. But these aside, I'd say that the choice between them is mostly down to the styling, and if the X100 series has proven anything, it's that the flat top rangefinder style is very much in fashion right now. Indeed, the X-E5 and XF 23 2.8 lens are unashamedly designed to look and feel as much like an X100 as possible, but with the benefit of interchangeable lenses. Place these two cameras side by side with the X-E5 on the left and the X100 VI on the right, and you'll see just how similar they are. The X-E5 body measures 125 by 73mm and it's 39mm thick, or 33mm at its thinnest point. It weighs 445 grams with a battery, or 535 grams when you fitted the 23 2.8 lens. Compare that to the X100 VI, which is the same thickness at its thinnest point and just 2mm wider and taller. Meanwhile, at 521 grams including battery and its fixed lens, it's a barely noticeable 14 grams heavier. So in terms of size and weight, Fujifilm really has created an interchangeable lens camera that's almost identical to the X100 VI, although as you'll discover there are a number of other feature differences to weigh up beyond simply fixed versus swappable lenses. In its favour, the X100 VI has a lens that's one stop brighter, at least compared to the 23 2.8. It has a built-in flash and a hybrid viewfinder with both a high-resolution EVF and an optical mode. The screen on it is also more detailed. Meanwhile, the lens has a built-in 4-stop ND filter, the mechanical bursts are a little bit faster, and the leaf shutter is not only quieter but can also synchronise the flash all the way up to the fastest mechanical shutter speed of 4,000th of a second. And if you add a lens accessory, the X100 VI will also become dust and splash resistant. Now that's rather a lot of benefits to the X100 VI for much the same money, and many will be understandably disappointed not to find weather sealing, a flash or even a high resolution viewfinder on the new X-E5. But it's not all one-sided. In its favour, the X-E5 does have a screen that angles up to face you, or indeed 90 degrees downwards, a UHS 2 card slot that's quicker to flush the buffer after a burst, a dedicated film simulation dial, the chance to talk directly to the latest Bluetooth instax link printers, more customizable zone autofocus shapes, a simpler viewfinder display mode, and a more common 3.5mm microphone input. Now I do understand that some of these are going to result in eye rolls for some of you, but no one can argue with the flexibility of an interchangeable lens mount. This is the X-E5's trump card, allowing it at one moment to mimic the portability and style of an X100, but with the choice of either a 23 or 27 pancake, or to reach as long or wide as you like with a full range of X-mount lenses at your disposal. Next, here's the X-E5 on the left, but this time with the previous X-E4 on the right. Now, it's been 4 years since the X-E4, and to be honest, I wondered if it would return. But here it is with the latest sensor, built-in stabilization, and X100 styling, albeit with a price hike as a result. It's gone from being one of the more affordable models in the series to comfortably mid-range. At first glance, the big physical change between the X-E5 and its predecessor is the addition of a grip on the front, which to me at least makes it more comfortable to hold. You'll also notice the logo in the upper right has been replaced by the AF assist lamp, almost looking like a small viewfinder window. In its place on the left is a new lever inherited from the X100 series, but in the absence of an optical viewfinder, this now functions more like the control on the GFX 100 RF. Now it's all fully customizable, but by default, a short push to either side cycles through the digital zoom crops, along with how they're going to be viewed during composition. For example, you can fill the screen or EVF with the magnified area, or view it as a smaller rectangle surrounded by a border that effectively lets you preview what's about to enter the frame, a little bit like having an optical rangefinder. You'll note that like the X-E4, there's sadly no built-in flash. This is an advantage of both the X100 and XT50.
It's supplied as standard with this tubular shaped neck strap. I believe the same as the one that came with the GFX 100 RF. It's pretty comfortable around your neck, but I prefer taking it off and carrying it in my Eastpak shoulder bag instead.
At first glance, the aluminium top panel looks similar to the X100 series, but look again and there's a couple of differences. Most obviously, there's a new recessed dial on the left-hand side dedicated to adjusting film simulations, with 6 fixed settings peeking through a small window, and those are for Provia, Velvia, Astia, Classic Chrome, Reala Ace and Acros, along with 3 custom positions. I like the design of this dial as it doesn't replace an existing control nor spoil the otherwise flat, smooth left-hand surface. From the menus, you can choose the filter type for Acros, as well as assigning any of the other film simulations like Sepia, Eterna or Nostalgic Negative to those 3 custom FS positions. But in better news, you can also now have the chance to apply your own recipes to these 3 custom positions, which is a really nice feature to have on the X-E5. In the middle of the top plate is a hotshoe with pins for an external flash and holes in the front for the built-in microphones. Again, there's no built-in flash on this model. To the right is a dedicated shutter speed dial, which lacks the lift-up ISO adjustment to the X100. It provides manual access to speeds from 1 second to 4,000th of a second in one-stop increments, while turning it to T lets you use the rear thumb dial to access speeds up to 180,000th of a second, at least with the electronic shutter, or as long as 15 minutes, and that's again without the need for bulb timers or menus. It's a feature that's common on all Fujifilm cameras, but I think it's really valuable. Bulb is also available if you prefer to trigger exposures by hand with a cable release. Eagle-eyed Fujifilm followers will, however, notice a new P position on this dial, indicating program mode. Now, functionally, this works exactly the same as just putting both the shutter speed dial and the lens aperture ring to A, so it's only representing a mild shortcut. Unlike the fully automatic mode on the X-T50 though, this does not unlock auto subject detection. In fact, this isn't an option on the X-E5 at all, which is a shame because I thought it worked really well. To the right is a dedicated exposure compensation dial, which still doesn't lock and subsequently may turn when you remove it from a tight bag, so do be warned. Between them is the same threaded shutter release with a power collar switch as the X100. Meanwhile, there's small dials on the front and rear, both with push-to-click functions. By default, the front finger dial adjusts the ISO sensitivity, but it can be reassigned to say exposure compensation or adjusting the film simulations if their dedicated dials are set to custom, of course. Meanwhile, the rear dial adjusts the shutter speed by default, while pushing it will punch into the image to check focus or details. Again, it's all pretty customizable. Round the back, the X-E5 looks a lot like the X100 series, albeit with a smaller round viewfinder eye cup. Like that model, you can navigate using the touchscreen or a small but very tactile joystick. The viewfinder is electronic only, so it does lack the hybrid optical mode of the X100 series. Now personally, while I'm impressed by the technical side of the OVF on the X100, I rarely actually use it in person, so I'm happy to compose electronically. The X-E5 does however inherit the X-T50's viewfinder spec, so you're getting a 2.36 million dot OLED with 0.62 times magnification. In contrast, the latest X100s boast a more detailed 3.69 million dot panel, albeit with much the same viewfinder magnification. At first, I think like you, I was disappointed Fujifilm didn't use a high-res EVF, but to be honest, the fairly modest magnification means I didn't actually notice that much difference between it and the X100 VI in practice. I only spotted it on very fine or slightly diagonal lines when I was really looking for it. And in a fun new feature, the X-E5 also offers an alternative simple view in the EVF, which removes most of the information to leave the basic exposure details coloured in red at the bottom, with a needle on the right side to indicate over or under exposure. Strangely, for a camera that inherits various specs from recent models, the X-E5 is equipped with a fairly coarse screen resolution of just 1.04 million dots. Compare that to the 1.62 million dots of the X100 VI and X-E4, or 1.84 on the X-T50. Again though, I didn't particularly notice it being glaringly low resolution in practice, but it is a disappointing decision again at this price point. I am however pleased to report the X-E5 inherits the more flexible screen articulation of the X-E4, angling up beyond the 90-degree limit of the X100 and X-T50 to completely face forward for selfies or vlogging, a key benefit over those models without the fuss of a side hinged mechanism. It'll also angle down lower too, beyond the usual 45 degrees or so to almost 90, making it easier to frame when pointing directly downwards. Moving on, the focus mode switch has been moved to the left hand side like the X100 series, and this is where you'll also find the same ports as the X-T50, so a 3.5mm mic input that's more useful than the 2.5 on the X100, USB-C and micro HDMI. You can use the X-E5 as a standard USB webcam, and the port also doubles as a headphone jack when using the supplied adapter. Turning to the underside, you'll notice a Bluetooth button in one corner and a tripod thread that's only slightly off axis. Meanwhile, like the X100, the battery and card share the same compartment, with the X-E5 unsurprisingly powered by the same NP-W126S. In real world use, I was getting about 250 shots and a few minutes of video per charge. As you'd expect, there's a single SD card slot, but at least like the X-T50 it does support faster UHS 2 cards, and I'll talk about bursts in just a moment. Before moving on, I wanted to mention again a very welcome feature in the wireless menus that, like the recent X100, finally brings direct instax printing back to the X series over Bluetooth. This means it will directly talk to all the current Instax Link printers, including the wide, square and mini, although like the X100 only the mini Link 2 and 3, not the original version. I'd expect this to become a standard feature going forward, but who knows if they'll equip older models with a firmware update. Now for imaging, with the X-E5 sharing the same 40 megapixel APS-C sensor as most models in the current lineup, including the X-T50, X-T5, X-H2 and X100 VI. Unlike all those models, the X-E5 also includes built-in sensor shift stabilization, or IBIS for short. I believe using the same unit as the X-T50, but now with an improved algorithm claiming up to 7 stops of compensation in the middle. Now, in my test with the X-E5, I personally only experienced around 4 stops of compensation, which coincidentally is similar to what I measured on the X-T50, while on the X100 VI I actually managed 5 or 6 stops. But it's still a highly viable feature and one that lets you deploy lower ISOs in dimmer conditions for nice clean results. And while it is stating the obvious, the major benefit of the X-E5 over the X100 series is the chance to swap lenses. Now, knowing that many potential buyers will be wanting to mimic the look and coverage of the X100, Fujifilm has launched a new XF 23mm f2.8 pancake prime lens alongside the X-E5, which shares a similar size and weight to the existing 27mm f2.8 prime. Sure, it's a stop dimmer than the X100's built-in lens and it won't focus as close and it doesn't have a built-in ND filter, but it really does turn the X-E5 into a camera that looks a lot like the X100, but again with the chance to swap lenses, and that is going to be enough to sell it to many people. But now for the big question, to find out how the depth of field varies between the new 23 2.8 and the X100 VI at f2, I'm going to toggle between shots I took with both cameras at their maximum apertures. Note that the subject distance was exactly the same here, but due to optical differences and focus breathing, you're seeing different coverage and subject sizes, but it still shows what you're going to get from each camera at the same distance. As expected, the 23 f2 lens on the X100 VI is delivering a shallower depth of field with larger bokeh blobs and softer rendering too. In comparison, the bokeh blobs from the new XF 23 2.8 are inevitably smaller here, but also have more defined edges. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to describe it as busy bokeh, but it's definitely less creamy than the X100. Now remember, you can alternatively fit the older XF 23 f2 to deliver similar bokeh on the X-E5, but that is a physically much bigger lens. I'll try to make a more detailed video about the XF 23 2.8 soon. As for quality options, the X-E5 shares essentially the same menus as other models with the same sensor and image processor. So you're getting 5 different aspect ratios, 3 different types of raw compression, the chance to swap JPEG for HIF, and the usual image effects including color, chrome and grain. Note there isn't a panorama crop like the GFX models, but there is the usual panoramic option on the drive menu, albeit with the usual varied results. Now the resolution, noise and dynamic range are all the same as previous models with the same sensor and image processor, so there's no need to present them all again here. But if you're interested, check out my X-T50 review for a detailed rundown. As always, the drive menu is where you'll find the burst options, which appear to be inherited from the X-T50. So that's a top speed of 8 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, or up to 20 with the electronic shutter, albeit anything faster than 13 frames per second is cropped by 1.29 times to 24 megapixels. There's also pre-burst options. In my test with the mechanical shutter, I fired off 20 uncompressed RAW files in 2.33 seconds for a speed of around 8.5 frames per second, with the buffer then taking about 7 seconds to fully write to a fast UHS-2 card. This roughly matched what I measured with the earlier X-T50. Interestingly, the X100 VI enjoys faster 11 frames per second mechanical bursts, but it is a bit limited by its UHS-1 slot, which in my test took 17 seconds to clear a burst of 17 uncompressed RAW files. There is, however, another important difference between their shutters. The X-E5 employs a focal plane shutter, like the other interchangeable lens models in the series. Like the X-T50, this means a top mechanical shutter speed of 4,000th of a second and a fastest flash sync speed of 180th of a second. In contrast, the X100 employs a leaf shutter that may share the same top mechanical speed of 4,000th, but will sync the flash right up to that speed. It's also almost silent in operation versus the slightly louder thunk of the X-E5. That said, as someone who shoots a lot with an X100, I actually quite like the shutter sound and feel of the X-E5, providing more feedback while still remaining pretty discreet. Moving on to autofocus, the performance and options are also essentially unchanged for models like the X-T50. So, you're getting subject detection for animals, birds, bikes, cars, planes and trains on one menu, and humans annoyingly still on another. And again, sadly, not the auto subject detection of the X-T50. Dig a little deeper though, and you'll see the X-E5 now has fully customizable Zone AF areas with no restrictions, so you can make them tall and thin, long and narrow, or literally any rectangular shape or square shape in between. Moving on to video, the X-E5 also shares much the same options as the X-T50, so you're getting 1080 or 4K from 24 to 60p, 6.2K up to 30p, and high-speed 1080 options up to 240p. As before, there's a bunch of encoding options including H.264 in 8-bit, H.265 in 10-bit, and a choice of bit rates from a maximum of 200 megabits per second down to a new lowest setting of just 8 megabits per second. Now I didn't have time to do any overheating tests, so I'm going to add a comment when I've got those results. Here's how 1080 footage looks at 25p, which is uncropped horizontally. Next for 1080 at 50p, which like the X-T50 incurs a mild 1.1 times crop. Now for the high speed 1080 mode, starting with 1080 at 100p, slowed here by 4 times. All the high speed modes incur a tighter 1.23 times crop and are recorded without sound. Next for 1080 at 200p, again with the 1.23 times crop and no sound. Now back to 1080 at 25p, before switching it to standard 4K at 25p, again uncropped up to 30p. Next 4K at 50p, which like 1080 footage incurs a mild 1.1 times crop up to 60p. And now for the high-res 6.2K mode, here at 25p, which incurs a 1.23 times crop. Now, the benefit of recording in a high resolution is capturing more detail, which in turn lets you zoom in and reframe a little without losing quality on a 4K project. Speaking of quality, back to standard 4K here, uncropped at 25p, before switching to the 4K HQ mode, which is generated from 6.2K, so it's only available up to 30p, and it does incur a 1.23 times crop. As I switch between them, it can be hard to make a direct comparison as the field of view is different, but the 4K HQ and 6.2K modes do have the potential for crisper details. Now again, since the video is essentially the same as the X-T50, there's no point in repeating it all again here. So again, I'll direct you to my review of the X-T50 if you want to learn more about autofocus, stabilization and rolling shutter. But there is one aspect of the X-E5 that makes it different from both the X-T50 and X100 for video users. Being able to flip the screen up to face yourself is of course a key advantage over the X100 VI if you're into vlogging, although really you do want a lens wider than the 23mm f2.8 that I have here, but it does give you an idea of how it looks with IBIS and at the maximum f2.8 aperture. Okay, now it's time for my verdict so far, during which I'm going to show you more photos taken with the X-E5 and the 23mm f2.8 pancake lens. The Fujifilm X-E5 becomes one of the most attractive mid-range mirrorless cameras around right now in terms of both style and specifications, essentially repackaging the X-T50 into a body that mimics the enormously popular X100 series. Indeed, that might be all you need to know. It's an X100 with the chance to swap lenses. Fit the new 23 2.8 lens and many won't be able to tell the difference. Fit the 27 2.8 pancake and you have a customized X100 with slightly tighter coverage. Switch these out for an ultra-wide or telephoto and you can do things the X100 can only dream of. For most people, this is going to be the more sensible camera. But like many things in life, it's not quite that simple, especially for the enthusiasts out there. The X100 VI has a number of benefits, including a brighter f2 aperture, at least if you're matching the lens size, an optical viewfinder option, more detailed electronic viewfinder and more detailed screen, built-in flash, built-in ND filter, faster mechanical bursts, and a leaf shutter that's not only quieter, but which can synchronize a flash up to 4,000th of a second. It can also be made weatherproof with an accessory, and some of us actually enjoy the restriction of a fixed lens. And if any of those features are important to you, then an X100 VI could still be a better choice. In fact, the launch of the X-E5 and knowing its features could cement that decision. But I suspect a camera with much the same looks as an X100, coupled with the flexibility of an interchangeable lens mount, will outweigh most of those downsides for most people. Bottom line, the X-E5 is likely to be another big hit for Fujifilm and relieves some of the strain from the X100 6Qs, so best get your order in sooner rather than later. And that's it for my review. Fujifilm cameras always generate a lot of interest, so I'd love to hear what you think and which has now become the best model for you in the lineup. Oh, and as for a new X Pro model, it's surely now waiting for the next generation of sensors, at least whenever that will be. If you're thinking of buying an X-E5, you can check the latest prices using the links below. Or if you've got any used gear to buy, sell or trade, just pay a visit to mpb.com, again link below. Thanks to MPB for sponsoring this video and thanks to you for watching it. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.